Okay, let's start the webinar. Good afternoon and welcome to another one of our webinars from Nathan Trust. My name is Philip Nathan. Just a bit of housekeeping first. The webinar will be recorded and it'll be posted on our YouTube channel. There's a Q&A at the bottom, so if you have any questions, please ask them questions. Ask as many as you want, as early as you can, and that's the best chance of you of getting them answered. Today's webinar is on a global payroll, how to run a global payroll. We're joined by Paul Voakes from PeakPEO, who has been in this industry a long time. I don't want to give away your age there now, Paul. Welcome.
Thank you. Yes, I've been in the industry for about 15 years, so been running international payroll for our clients for that length of time.
Okay, and I know that certainly international payroll became more and more relevant post-COVID. If we are in a post-COVID world, who knows? But with people moving around and flying all around the place, it's certainly a lot of questions we get with international businesses. And the answer we usually give them is when they say, I want to run a global payroll out of Ireland, I want to employ people in Portugal, India, and South America, or wherever else, we say it's very difficult, but you guys have a good solution. So I guess from a I suppose high level, and then we can get into the detail, is running a global payroll in Ireland, or running a global payroll from an Irish or any country from any jurisdiction. What, easy, hard, somewhere in between?
Okay, I think that being part of the EU in Ireland does help you certainly to run payrolls throughout the EU. And actually, there's a law that says that you can be a foreign employer in all those countries, but when you actually come to deploy that system, you suddenly become involved in quite a lot of bureaucracy, if not obstruction, to be able to do it. And so even within the EU, where theoretically you should be able to do it, it becomes quite difficult. And the second thing is that once you go outside that, all the rules are different. I mean, they're different in the EU, but the principles of European law should apply. And once you get outside there, some of the countries, it's the Wild West. And so making sure that you understand what the costs of getting into an international payroll, but probably worth getting out of an international payroll in a country, is probably a great idea for a start.
Okay, and
so I've just lost your audio.
You got me again?
Yeah, got you.
Zoom crashed. That was great, wasn't it? Timing is everything. Anyway, we'll keep the show on the road. But let's just make sure everybody is still back in. Yes, they are. Sorry about that, guys. I just had a quick crash in Zoom. We'll edit that out. The big race now is access to talent. You're an Irish company or UK company or any jurisdiction, and you have two people that you want to hire in Poland or Italy that are fantastic developers or programmers or engineers or whatever it might be, and you want to hire them quickly, but they want to be on a payroll. That seems like it should be easy, but it's actually for that Irish company to do it, they've got two options. One is set up a complicated company structure in Poland, or go to you guys. That's the solution you're providing, isn't it?
Pretty much. The issue is that just in terms of banking, your banks will have, your business bank will have a real problem if you're paying an individual in another country through your Irish bank account. At some point when they see it, they'll be asking you, how are you doing this? And if you're not running a payroll, they will see it as a problem for running your account, and may well even freeze your account until you've proved how you've done it legally. So the other alternative is that you have to set up in country, and that means an entity, normally of some kind, and set up a bank account in that country so that you can pay people. And how you need to do it is actually to get the money into Poland or wherever you're going, and then pay from the local bank account and have all the direct debits, etc., for the social costs out of the Polish bank account.
Yeah. So for the company, it's pretty straightforward. How what does it look like for the employee, the person in Poland working for that company? Is it just business as usual for them? They did this as if they were working for a Polish company?
Well, they would be working for a Polish company, and the question is there sometimes how, you may be very well liquidated in Ireland, but your subsidiary or branch or entity in Poland may not be as well funded, and so you do get questions from the employees to, their security in terms of their job function.
Okay, and by security means if they're if they're 12 months in a business, or they go full time, they want all the rights and all the rights that they're entitled to when they're as if they're working for a Polish company.
Yeah, well, you do need to be legal, and so for instance, if it was France, the rules around employment in France are very complex. They actually have a book that they call the brick, and it's made of tissue paper, and it's literally the size of a brick that dictates how employment takes place. And so really, it's not just running the payroll. I think that you need to have local advice, and also that local advice needs to interpret what the customs are in that country. Because although that France isn't very far away, their attitude to employment is very different to Ireland.
Okay, that's interesting. So it's like the payroll, people get we see the terms running a local payroll, but what you're actually trying to be is an employer in that country and try to deal with all the nuances of being an employer from a wider HR perspective. Yeah,
and I think that when you start getting into it, the costs of setting up the entity, and if you choose to getting out of the country again, can be quite expensive, but also ensuring that you have the contracts in place correctly, and that you handle the individual correctly in terms of the amount of hours that they work and how to manage them.
And handling the individual, has that changed since you're in this industry a while? Do you find that individuals are more demanding, not demanding in a bad sense, but demanding as they know their rights more? It's never been more relevant to make sure that you've got that piece right.
I think the difference has been, for me, it's not been so much that, Philip, it's been that companies that have looked at employing people overseas in a different way. And I think that it started happening even before COVID, where they were looking at costs, and there's a competition amongst countries for attracting investment into the business. And a typical example would be Estonia, where they used to have social costs of about 32%, and they've dropped them to 2% to try and encourage people to look at the talent in Estonia, because it's become much more affordable to employ. And you see that to a certain extent in Ireland, where the social costs are just over 10%. Comparing that to France or even Germany, it's a great deal more expensive to employ people there. And so they haven't gone into the competition side, but it's definitely been a conscious effort from some countries to become more attractive for employment and for outsourcing.
And do you see that driving more people, like through your own business, that you're sourcing more and more people in places like Estonia, and once they drop the social costs, they get more popular?
I think the two trends coming out of COVID has been, first of all, I think it's driven by home working to a certain extent, but nearshoring as opposed to offshoring. So some of our clients in America who would have been outsourcing to the Philippines or to India are much more looking at Mexico, Colombia, Chile, that are in a similar time zone and still have talent there. And the other thing is that executive travel, where you send salespeople or whoever traveling between countries, we're getting much, many of our clients are now saying, well, actually, we're going to employ someone in the region, but we haven't got an entity in Germany. So if we're going to put someone there, what we'll do is we'll outsource the employment.
Okay. And there's multiple concepts of this. There's like outsourced employment, employer of record, PEO, global payroll. Are they all in and around the same things, or is there subtle but important differences between them?
I think that ADP would say that they would do a managed payroll system for you, for instance, is one of the global companies, but it means that you'd have to have an entity and a bank account in each of the countries that you went to. Many businesses, for different reasons, and I'll give you an example here. Dunkin' Donuts wanted to see whether they could sell donuts to the Chinese, and so used us to employ people in China for their first venture into China. And partly it was because they wanted to move very quickly, and partly it was that if it didn't work, they didn't have a huge infrastructure that was going to cost them an awful lot of money to get out of. But other people will use us to say, right, well, we need to be in 20 countries. We don't want entities, all the tax liabilities in those countries. So we'll use us and we become the employer of record. The Americans use the employer of record. A professional employment organization is what we are. But we have the entities or the partners in country to employ people. They work for us and we do all the backroom office for the employment, but they actually work for our clients.
Okay, and how does it work contractually then? So if imagine I'm in Ireland, I'm working for an American company, they haven't set up an organization in Ireland, but they want to hire me. I don't want to work as a contractor. I want to be part of the system, if that's the right term. I want to get all my social charges paid. So I have a contract with you and I have a contract with the American company, both are one.
No, well, there's two problems for an American company wanting to employ you in Ireland. First of all, if you're considered to be an employee, i.e. you're not taking a risk, you're not taking a business risk, then actually if they don't have a system of employment, it's illegal in America. They can get sued in America for tax evasion. So even though it's Irish tax that they may be avoiding. So the contract is, in a PEO situation, a professional employment organization will have an MSA with the American company, and they will have the contract of employment with the individual in Ireland. They will invoice the American company, the money comes in, and then the payroll is run with a PeakPEO, and PeakPEO would pay the taxes, the pensions, all the other things that are necessary, as well as the wages to the employee.
Okay, and just MSA or Master Service Agreement?
Oh, sorry, I beg your pardon. Master Service Agreement between, and the way that we do it is we have one Master Service Agreement, and then we put addendums on the back for each country that the client wants to be in. And yeah, there are certain advantages in that, because one of the difficulties when you get a number of countries is making sure that the money gets there in time for payroll. And believe it or not, it's much easier when you have a banking system that have come to trust you in terms of money laundering and those kind of checks. For instance, sending money to India is, when you first start, it can be quite difficult. And certainly when you're sending money east, it takes longer than if you're sending it west.
Okay, so you're finding that the banking components Like I guess a lot of people, companies at the start might think the red tape from an individual country thing would be huge, but what you're seeing is the banking component of it is as complicated or more complicated than any other bit of it.
Yeah, I think that we, you know, as a group, we use different banks for sending money to different places because we know that they're better at doing it than other banks, which is quite surprising for me, even now that some of the banks don't like sending money, for instance, to Pakistan. So you have to find ways to be able to do that and make sure that it's not held up when it gets there.
I want you to say, like, if you were say, we use the example of Estonia. So for an Irish company, and we've got 2 people, and we're paying them, or we're trying to run a payroll in Estonia. My guess is that would be ferociously complicated, but without your help. But you're saying that the banks in Ireland will pick up. There's a reasonable chance that they'll go, what's this money going to Estonia for? What's that about?
I think Estonia wouldn't be an example that I'd give, because within the EU, you know, money travels fairly well. You know, the fee, you know, it's part of their principle to have the free movement of capital. But I think when you are sending money, for instance, to Colombia, India is certainly one. Even some of the rules around getting money into China can be quite difficult. And it's not impossible because we do it, but I think that there's an education in how it's done.
And I guess the point is, what you said, you could miss payroll because of it. And any employer knows that missing payroll is...
It's not a good thing to do.
No, it's not. And even, listen, you don't want to be explaining to employees, oh, it got stuck in a bank. It's like the dog ate my homework sort of excuse.
Well, believe it or not, I think that in some countries, the chaos that is in the system, the employees would probably believe it. But yeah, I think that as a principle, you know, it's a real trust problem for an employee.
And just a couple of questions. We've seen this a couple of times around stock options. People are asking about. So if you're working through you're working for an American company in Ireland, working through yourself, payroll's going through PeakPEO, they also are entitled to RSUs or stock options. Is that possible through that arrangement as well?
Okay, yes, it is. In that particular case, the stock options agreement would be through the employee to, you know, the company that they work with, because obviously they don't want stock in PeakPEO, they want stock in, you know, the client's company. So once that's done, when they actually take up the option, it needs to go through payroll, and taxes need to be paid because they acquired those shares through their work. So we do this for a number of our clients. I won't say that it's necessarily always straightforward, particularly when we can't get a prediction of how much money it's likely to be in terms of value, so that we can give them a tax rate. Because quite often when, you know, they are large amounts, it quite often changes the tax rate of the individual. And of course, the company, you know, issuing them normally need to hold back the personal tax from the issue.
Okay, but the simple answer is yes. There's no. So it's like the employee in the country doesn't really notice any difference.
No, he gets his shares direct, and then he'll have the amount go through his bank account as a benefit in kind.
Okay, very good. There's a question here about termination, and if you need to put people on performance reviews and things like that. So how is that managed through the employer record type solution?
Well, that's a huge question because it depends on the country. You know,
will we start with France and just not mention them at all?
Okay. France and Germany, getting rid of people is difficult unless you catch them red-handed with their hands in the till. I think though that part of this is actually understanding that if you go with a PEO company, they will have local expertise in how to do that. So, for instance, we've got an American company who we've just let someone go in the UK who had some mental issues, so disability discrimination there, etc. So they said, look, this is the budget that we've got to get rid of this person. What's the best way to do it? We said, well, we'll do a compromise agreement with him, which actually happened this month. But equally well, if you're employing in Mexico or the USA, it's employment at will. And so getting rid of them is literally, same day. There's no, unless their contract says they have a month's notice, you can literally let them go the same day. But the key to this is having good, sound, and immediate legal advice in country, but also understanding the culture of how those rules apply. I think that if we're going to get into difficulty, it's when a client doesn't tell us that they want to let someone go early enough. If we have that conversation very early, they don't make mistakes.
Okay, and I think that also speaks of kind of the wider solution in that you mentioned that in country legal expertise is like, we think payroll, we just think send money, pay taxman. It's the bigger picture. So when you do have a problem as a company, you don't need to go look for a lawyer, you don't need to look for HR experts. You've got the solution ready to go.
Yeah, equally well, sometimes things will surprise you in that, for instance, if you put a fixed term contract into the Netherlands and then you want to get rid of someone, you'll have to pay out the contract. Okay. So, keeping it to the short time is probably a better thing than saying the thing and extending it, rather than decide that it's going to be an 18-month contract.
So kind of in a nutshell, what you're looking at, companies that are looking at global expansion and they want to hire talent in various different countries, they can either go through the growing pains of doing it themselves, cost, time, effort, or they can just hire you guys and just hire people, employ people, and make product.
Yeah, to be honest with you, there comes a stage, and it's normally the reason that a client might leave us in maybe one country. Beg your pardon. It's when the companies start employing 50, 75 people. The model then becomes more expensive than doing it yourself. But on smaller numbers than that, it's a very good solution and very quick. And also, we won't charge the client unless we've got an employee that's we're paying. So if you, for instance, have a performance management issue with someone and get rid of them, the pain stops on the last day that the employee leaves.
Okay, so it really is something they can ramp up and ramp down.
Yeah.
At their requirements.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're coming towards the end. We usually do about 25 minutes, but just I guess, and to wrap it up, is very interesting, and I think it's something like it is this global race for talent, isn't it? You're enabling this global race for talent, really, isn't that's a big part of it?
It's surprising how much is going on with particularly smaller companies. It's not just the big companies doing it, but smaller companies that say, no, we found someone that's absolutely right for our business and we don't really mind where he works. And I suppose that's even getting more and more case because of this ability to be able to communicate like this so efficiently and widespread broadband and etc. I guess we're an example of it. We've just taken on another person in Peru. Someone's working in Brazil. We've got people in Ireland, the UK, America. and we all work as a team.
And the important thing is that, so as a business, you guys are happy that you're doing everything right for that employee in Peru and Brazil, but also those people in Peru and Brazil are part of the system. They're paying their social, they're part of pensions, things like that. They don't have to worry about doing their own taxes, things that individuals tend to be poor at doing. They don't have that admin upkeep.
Yeah, and unless they've got that they qualify to fill in a tax return, they're on a PAYE system. And that could be benefits as well, like private medical insurance or pensions or life assurance, whatever it is. We sort the benefits out in country.
Okay, and you tend to have, I'm guessing, long relationships with your clients. Once they start with you, it just becomes the norm. When they onboard new talent in different countries, they just use you guys.
I think it's quite interesting here because there's two different sorts of PEO businesses, and I've been involved in both. And when I first started, the company that I first set up sold primarily to the tech companies in California for their, so Google was one of our clients at the time, but they didn't want their contractors to be Googlers. They wanted them to come on for 6 months, 18 months to do a project. And so many PEO companies deal in those contingent workers that come and go. I think PeakPEO, we've got a slightly different model in that we employ core employees 99% of the time. So once they come over to us, they stay as long as the job is. Do you know what I mean? It's open-ended.
Okay. It's normal. It's just like they're a normal employee of that business.
Absolutely, and so we get to know them pretty well.
Just a question there. So if you are working, it kind of ties in a bit with the thing about talked about the Google situation. What about IP and who has access to it? If you're working for the employer record in Ireland, but you're doing work on behalf of an American tech company, and I'm guessing that all the IP and ownership of what gets built, that's all squared away as well.
Yeah, in the employment contract, we make sure that we protect the interests of the client in terms of IP and confidentiality. In some, I've got to be honest, in some countries, I don't think the confidentiality would be enforceable. It would be quite difficult to do it because of the spread of countries. But certainly we try. It couldn't be done, I don't think, any better if you're going to employ them yourself. Okay.
Well, I think that's a good note to end at. This is like, it couldn't be better than if you were to employ them. So it really is. It's that kind of global employment solution that a huge part of the market is looking for. And there's, pay you guys your fee, and everything just works great. That's pretty much it, isn't it?
Well, I think so, and yeah, certainly the amount of growth that we've seen over the last 3-4 years has been amazing because people are looking at this very differently.
Yeah. Okay, brilliant. Well, I hope the growth continues. So listen, we'll wrap it there because we've come up to about 30 minutes, which is great. Thanks for all the questions and all the attendees. Paul Voakes from PeakPEO and PeakPEO.com. Thank you very much for your time. And just to remind everybody, we'll post this on our YouTube channel, and we'll send an email of the link to everybody that signed up for it. So thanks again, Paul.
Thank you very much for the time.
No problem. See you guys.
Bye.